All right. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully we'll have some more students joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started just a little bit early so that Kate can get to her appointment here. And really quickly, I'm just trying to pin myself so that I stay as the active speaker.
Oops, I got it.
All right, how do I get back to, where's the pin option? That's interesting. Usually it's 3 dots sitting there.
Yeah, you called it something different last time. It was interesting. It's like they changed the name of it.
Okay, I got to do it while I'm in gallery view. Okay. Spotlight for everybody. Okay, there we go. Hopefully I've taken over your screen and then you guys can see each other kind of at the top of the screen there. And I'm going to go ahead and do share screen and pop over to our Facebook page. All right, so hopefully we are now seeing Kathleen. Let me go back so I can just show you what I did there. So I went and I scrolled down and I found one of Kathleen's beautiful little paintings here, clicked on her name, and then what it does is it just isolates what Kathleen has shared on the page. So that's a great way if you're just wanting to see your own images or the images of somebody else that and what they shared. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning here, Kathleen. And I'm going to go ahead and give quick feedback if you want it. If you're not interested and would rather not have me talk.
Oh, I want you to be super critical.
All right, well.
I learn more that way.
That for week 3 and 4, but yeah, we will definitely get in there. So first off, awesome job doing all 3 paintings. That's amazing. That's a lot of commitment. I appreciate that. And we'll start with the black and white because that's what I started with. And it's a nice, kind of basic, minimal shapes, minimal values. And all in all, it looks pretty good to me. What are you thinking about this one, Kathleen? Or Kate?
I think it's either my photo or my horizon line's a little crooked. Looks like it goes downhill to the left. That could be my photo.
Yeah, we'll assume it is.
I see a little edge at the top, come to think of it, on the right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What did you think about doing just a kind of simplistic black and white painting here?
Well, it went really fast and that was kind of fun. And I've done them before in acrylic, but never in oil. So it was different with oil. So, and I couldn't tell you how different. It just felt different.
Oops, I think I'm losing you.
Froze.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I dropped out for a second. I just joined a stronger network, so hopefully you guys are hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I meant to do that before class, before I pushed record. It's kind of funny to use my printer. I have to change networks to communicate with my printer, and I forgot to switch back. So anyways, here we are. And I missed the end of what you said about it being quick, and that was nice.
Yeah, the oil seems to, be slipperier. It moves more easily than the acrylic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That being said, today I am going to be working solely in black and white acrylics. So for those of you who would like to do that, and you don't have them, maybe order some or get out to the store and just buy some cheap black and white acrylic paint if you'd like. And I'll show you why I do it and my thinking behind that. And you can decide if it's something you want to experiment. But if not, black and white oils are fine. Or of course, you're always welcome to add a little bit of color. Great. So what did you like working in the black and white acrylics or black and white oils better?
Well, I can see an advantage with the acrylic because it's going to dry so much faster that the next day you can essentially start painting with oil over it.
Exactly.
Whereas with the oils take, 3 days.
Absolutely. Yeah, my black and white painting is still wet actually from last Friday.
I paint pretty thin. So
Yeah, definitely mine was a little thicker. All right, well, very nice. I mean, it was nice simplistic thing. You've got like a gradation back there in the mountains that looks really nice. Like there's a little bit of fog or light coming through. And what we can do again with our black and white paintings is we can paint right over these. And I will show you next week a technique I like doing is glazing in to kind of harmonize the background color. And maybe I'll even be able to show you today if any of them dry enough. All right, let's go up to number 2, which was this one here. So you're introducing the beginning of color. Got nice soft gradations. Everything seems to be receding pretty well into space. Yeah, tell me about this one real quickly.
well, I think I've got the Three Musketeers on the left. Those are too evenly spaced. So I didn't like that one. So
you guys can tell that Kate's been in a number of my classes and she already can predict what I'm gonna say. Repetition of form is boring oftentimes, especially in nature. So when we find things like that, I'll either bind them so that I have one bigger shape, one smaller shape, or take one out or whatever else. But I very much appreciate, and I feel bad for Kate because now my voice is probably echoing around in your head when you're painting and critiquing you as you work, giving you feedback. But it's kind of a nice thing, I hope.
I didn't really see it when I was sitting there. I see it in the photograph.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start taking photographs all the time.
Well, yeah, and that's a great way to test your work. Holding it up in a mirror is a really great way to look at it. Getting away from it, putting it across the room or you getting across the room from it. There's lots of different techniques we can use. And that's a simple fix, right? With your oils, just take some darks and, bind these, and then you'll have one bigger shape here and the smaller tree here to kind of separate. All right, what else you got here?
Well, I changed it a little and I made the lightest area just to the left of the tall trees. So I changed yours just a little tiny bit.
Good, good. Yeah, feel free, you guys, to make every image your own. Editing and changing and manipulating is totally fine. And then what happens is after I've enjoyed it, nice colors, nice value shifts and everything, then I start to get in and I start to get nitpicky. This is where I would notice the repetition of form here. And then I begin to look over here and I'm wondering, this tree trunk makes perfect sense. It leads up into here. This tree trunk leads up into here. This area here is really broad or wide for going up into here. And this one kind of goes to nowhere.
Okay.
It actually even gets chopped off right there. So that would be just something if you wanted to kind of come in and edit those and see if, there's anything there that you'd like to change at all.
What do you do when you've got two tree trunks that one's back a little further and one's forward? Do you lighten one a little then in that broad area?
You definitely can. Yeah, you definitely can. Let's see here. Let me just save it as Kate. When I do that, do you guys see my desktop or do you still see Facebook?
Desktop.
Okay. Now you see your picture blown up really big.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to open it with Photoshop. All right, so now you guys see my Photoshop?
Yep.
All right, so let's just grab a little tool here. And I'll just grab a little bit. This is just a cloning tool. So even making it thinner. Oops. Something like that. So it's a little bit different. Can kind of help. And yeah, so you could bring one in front, you could bring one in back, but because of these trees being so dark and far away, that would make it interesting, kind of difficult to make, any big variations in here. So what I might do is, let's just grab a color. I'm going to gray this color down a little bit. And let's go ahead and just push these trees back a little bit here. Let's see, let's not do full opacity. So I'm just grabbing a spray paint brush with a little bit of blue gray. Oops, missed your trees.
Okay, I see.
Still really strong opacity. It's interesting. So by just, this is probably too light, truly, but just by kind of lightening those down a little bit, hopefully they now begin to fall back and these trees come forward a little bit more.
Okay.
And then that would give us the ability to kind of, you know, maybe move some tree trunks around a little bit and change some of that. So I know it's really messy and just kind of poorly
Yeah,
done.
I get the idea.
Yeah, that's okay. And everybody else kind of understand that by kind of pushing those back, by lightening up their values tiny bit. Now we've got a little more recession of space and things kind of
Okay.
hopefully open up.
I've
Yeah,
got 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Let's go back to Photoshop. All right, you seeing Photoshop again? I mean, Facebook again here?
I think so.
And your final one, this was your wipe away, I presume.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a wipe away, but that's all right.
Well, it started out that way, and then I started adding the color back, and
Yep, good.
it was just too much. So
Good,
total
good.
total failure, but that's okay. I'm humble enough that I will admit it and learn from it.
Great. Well, this is definitely fixable. You know, with oils that you can just go over it and go over it and go over it. That's what's so
Yeah.
nice about them. They're very forgiving. So yeah, I would definitely come back in and just paint back over the top of this now that you've kind of got an idea. What do you think is not working about it? Give me 2 or 3 things here really quickly.
Well, I don't like the sky. I don't like it. It looks like, the bottom part of a dipper. And I don't like my foreground reeds. I got too picky with them and too small strokes and whatnot. My trees on the left actually look better in real life. I don't know if it's the canvas. I buy cheap canvases and they've got a lot of texture. So I think that's what's bothering those. But in real life, I kind of like the variation of color. I think I like that the best of anything in this little painting.
Great. Yeah, I would say that's just probably the glare that's being picked
Yeah.
up. It's I understand that it's very difficult to photograph our paintings, especially if they are wet at all. Glare is a big issue, so I understand that completely. So yeah, I will echo what you just said. The sky is, I mean, I like your gradation from light to dark or warm to cool, but yeah, you have this interesting kind of smiley face here.
Yeah.
And then you literally have the exact same smiley face right above it,
Yeah.
following each other. So again, the repetition of form, if you just got rid of one of them, it would look better.
Okay.
Or changed it slightly.
I've got to leave, Michael, but
Okay,
thank you.
great.
I will redo it.
No worries. All right, great.
You
Take
can
care.
go ahead and continue to critique it for somebody else that might learn from my mistakes. So, okay. Talk
Great.
to you later.
Take care,
Have a
Kate.
good day.
Thank you.
So yeah, the other thing that I would have mentioned to Kate was that these grasses become very much the language of grass and not the representation of grass. So I'm always urging my students to look for the shape and the form and to watch out that you're not just doing grass, grass as you're doing your brush strokes, grass, grass, even back here, grass, grass. Look to the shapes and look to the form and try to simplify and have your viewer turn it into grass for you. But yeah, all in all, nice. And I'm very proud of Kate for taking on so much there. And great. Who else would like me to discuss their paintings here? I can start with Karen if you want. Karen, are you on here still? Karen Strand, there you are. All right. Well, I really like this nice, brushy, action-packed image here. There's a lot of motion. It's nice and simplistic, in a good way. And when I say simple, for today's class and for the last week's class, it's generally a good thing, because that was the goal, right? To keep things simple, to keep just the big shapes, and looking to 2 to 3 to possibly 4 values. This looks like you used a bit of a wipe away method. Is that right?
It's completely wipe away.
Okay, great. 5x7, tiny black and white study, 5x7, Payne's gray, dirty brush, white back, no white. Oh, really? No white. That's fantastic. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just the cheap little panels, gessoed panels from, I don't know, art something.
And it looks really smooth. Like I don't see a canvas texture.
No, it's got kind of a tooth to it. I like to do this on UPO because it's really smooth.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely, yeah.
But the UPO means you can never layer up the paint very much, in my opinion.
Okay, great. Yeah, and that's something I've only had some students use. I've never actually used the UPO, but it does look like fun surface to paint on.
Yeah, I have some 20-year-old oils that I can crumple up and the paint does not come off, but I'm still not convinced if it were thick,
Right, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, probably would depend on, well, yeah, a number of weather elements and everything else and all that. So,
Yeah.
And did you do just the one this week?
Yeah, I had big plans to do more. I almost didn't post this, but I wanted to get some interaction from you. Basically, I feel like when I do a study like this, it's wipe away. I'm throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what'll stick.
Okay, well, yeah, and that is kind of true. So yeah, I mean, what you're doing is just looking for the big design. You're finding some sense of movement, some structure, and just establishing your values really quickly. And again, so today's class, I will be doing black and white acrylic paint. It looks like a number of students have joined here since we've started. And so I will be talking about that with using the acrylics and why I like to use acrylics oftentimes. And so, yeah, I mean, did you enjoy it? It looks like you had fun. Like there's just action in your brush strokes and in the movement here.
Oh, I'm a wipe away person. I do figure work wipe away.
Wow. Okay.
Like I'll go to a life session and I'll do it wipe away because when the model moves, I can just move it.
There you go.
But maybe for me, the hard part is committing.
Yeah, that can be interesting.
And
So-
in this study, you can see that I didn't really commit, to anything.
Right. I mean, there's a couple things that look a little wishy-washy and everything else. You know what this really reminds me of is when I do little tiny value studies to kind of like thumbnail sketches, just to kind of establish motion and big shape. So a lot of times I'll have a number of tiny little thumbnails. I mean, just a couple inches big, just really quickly where I'm kind of splashing the paint across just to test and see, does it look interesting? Does it make a nice abstract shape and design that, once I build it up and put in the detail and everything else, would it be interesting? And I think this is interesting. You've got a variation in, lines and shapes and values. You've got nice angles. You've got meandering, soft curves, as well as more angled lines. So yeah, I like it. I think there's something here for sure.
Cool.
Good. All right. Well, I will be curious what you think about today's assignments. And let's see, how do I get back here?
Hey, Michael.
Yeah. Yes, other Karen. No, it wasn't Karen. Who said that?
Susan,
Susan. All right.
and she's muted.
Can't hear you, Susan.
Yeah, I did like you said, basic, I'm losing my voice, basic shapes of, where is it?
Here's your reference. Oops, you're muted again.
Okay, I also did a black and white, but I
Oh.
didn't post it. Here's the black and white, if you can see it.
Yep. Can see.
And I'm embarrassed to even show this, but then I did the black and white, then I did the photograph, and it's Oswald State Park, Arch Cape. And it was really a difficult picture. I spent like 4 days trying to find the right picture, and I finally spent too much time on that. So this was so beautiful when I'd seen it, but it very difficult to try to set it up because there was no horizon. So I made my own, and you can be mean and say whatever you want about it. Okay, so I used the transparent red. I never used that except for a portrait once, but I see now the repetition of the 3 trees. You said not to make them too repetitive or they're boring. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, I like what you've got. It's nice, it's big, it's basic. You're laying things in, you're trying different things out. Like you said, you introduced a horizon line, and it looks pretty naturalistic. Actually.
Really? Okay.
I mean, it looks like it could belong there as opposed to your, having it way up and off like this. What is it about this that drew you to it? You can either say initially or from the photo. What was it that was interesting about this?
No, I was there, and it was a beautiful sunny day. Those that aren't in Oregon, it just inspired me. And I should have maybe taken the photograph a different, like more towards the left. I was taking it right above it. So I thought it was beautiful. The photograph didn't even do it justice, but I would have liked to have, what inspired me was the water and the way that the light and dark bounced off. I got it. It's not a mountain, the cape or something.
Right. Yeah.
It's not really a good picture to paint, I don't think, but I did it only because it was, I kept it simple, the assignment, just to pick, shapes.
Good. And you did do that. Yeah. So when I look at this photo, what makes me excited about it is these strong contrasts between light and dark.
Okay.
Here, and they're very dynamic, right? It's very crisp and sharp in like juxtaposition to the rounder shapes of the water, the softer forms here. And then also, then you have the different forms here, the little tiny shapes and detail of your tree.
Well, yeah, I got the cheap canvas boards. I got paint on me now, white paint. And then would you paint this, Michael? I mean, if you were there, standing there doing pleasure. At first I thought this is not a good picture to paint. I should just do Michael's examples, but I didn't. I wanted to.
Well, I'm proud of you for trying and challenging yourself. It is difficult. And that's the nice thing. I'm sorry it took you 4 days.
I should have just done your pictures.
Well, and when you said 4 days, did you mean 4 days of picking your?
Yeah. I kept
reference?
every day stressing and looking for the right. I looked at on the Facebook and the excellent pictures you provided, but then I thought that it's like copying your work. But at Weimar, if anyone's looking for acrylic paint, I got it for like $2. It's called cheap.
It's cheap right on it.
It's called cheap. I don't know if this would be a picture that would have value as far as continuing, but I wanted to stick to the assignment. I wanted to, first I did it in like a sketch. You can't see it.
Good.
And then I wanted to just do I don't want to take any more time for others. Just dealing with light, dark, and medium, simple shapes. And I don't know if it has value. It would be complicated painting trees and stuff. But okay, there's the assignment.
Good. Okay, so A+ on doing the assignment.
Thanks.
A+ on challenging yourself. I do appreciate it. But yeah, this is, this big lump of the tree when you didn't really want to paint the tree at all. Is kind of funny that you just made it such a huge, because over here it's only a tiny element.
I know the shape's too big, isn't it?
Huge
Yeah.
element. Yeah, so the great thing, and this is for all of you guys, is that when we do these little quick paintings, you can very quickly begin to realize, oh, this is going to work or it's not going to work. When we see big, dark, simplistic shapes and values, it's a quick way of judging, is this an interesting abstract form? Is this drawing me in? Does it? So I don't know how long it took you to paint this, but I'll assume about a half hour or so.
Yeah, right. That's
So
correct.
you just decided at this point, you know what? It's not as interesting as I thought. Sometimes photos are just photos. Sometimes, you know, our memories and then plus the photo still doesn't equal a painting. You know, but I do think you could make a painting out of this.
Oh, really? Okay.
But it would probably be, you know, you may not have a horizon line. It may be that you just zoom in on an area of it. Yeah, I don't know, because there are elements here that I like, you know, again, the juxtaposition of the darks and lights down here, the strong, crisp, sharp edges. There's really nice contrast going on, but it's a tough one.
Yeah, I know.
It's almost split kind of in half with the, you know, the ground form and the water. There's a number of things that I would definitely be battling in this if I was to choose to do it, but you know, it definitely could be done. Yeah, I might crop it like so that it's like this part, maybe the top of there, and these rocks maybe skipping out on this. I don't know. I would have to investigate that for a while. But anyways, the main thing is that you did it, that you experimented with big shapes, keeping it simple. And then the number two thing is again, this is just a great way to test and just go, you know what? Okay, I'm into it for a half hour. That's not very much time. I still got practice with lights, darks, and shapes. You know, that's what Michael wanted from me. And you know what? If I could spend 10 more hours on this painting and still maybe not come away with a successful piece. So maybe it's better that I just move on to something else.
I'll move on.
That happens to me all the time. I've got piles of paintings.
Really? Okay.
Starts all the time. So
Michael?
Yeah.
May I insert a little idea on that one? And that is that part of the problem to me is that there is nothing in the painting or the photograph to set scale. And one of the things that, say, Cole did in his paintings, he'd put a little human figure in somewhere, and in the bushes or whatever. But that figure would set the scale of a very dramatic landscape.
Perfect. Yes, exactly right. Let me see.
You know, I wanted to say, Michael, Susie here, that when you're critiquing other people's pictures, I learn so much, even though it's not my picture. So I find that it's valuable when you critique any picture.
Yeah, I 100%. Oops, I'm gonna pop over to Facebook here or Photoshop. So here's a painting I did this last year.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, but so I don't know if you know, if you guys are from Oregon, you'd recognize hopefully Haystack Rock here. And it was the same thing, Yvonne, that you were just discussing. Putting these little tiny figures in there.
Oh, yeah.
Really helped to establish, and this is a big painting, it's a 4-foot tall painting. So the figures are also kind of like a reward for paying attention. You know, you kind of see the big shapes and the big thing, and they're just little scribbles. You can really see.
Great.
You know, look that's a kid, maybe a dog, could be a chicken. Whoever takes their chicken to the beach. Yeah, you know, but that looks, you know, that's just, I actually think that looks like a figure with her arms crossed. She's not impressed
I
with
see
the sunset at all. See the little figure there, 2 figures. Anyways, yes, Yvonne is right. Sometimes that is a really useful tool, is to throw something in there that gives us size. I mean, you know, when you establish the trees, that would help because they'll be tiny, you know, far away and everything else. But Anyways, yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on any of these, but so that's the number one feedback I get when I'm at the end of the 8 weeks or whatever from my students is that the critiques take too long.
Oh.
So in the future, what I'll do is probably just grab a couple at a time, each week and try to pick different people. And that's just so I don't lose you guys and don't, Susan's right though. If you are paying attention and listening in, there's definitely, we can learn
Absolutely.
good and the bad. I want to pop over to Renita. Are you on here?
Yeah.
Let me see. There you are. How's it going? I really appreciate you popping in first and bursting the bubble and posting first. That was very brave of you. And this was fun to see. And so I appreciate it. So are you okay if we talk about your painting a little bit?
Sure.
Perfect. All right. I would like to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
This is wipe extraction. I like that. That even sounds cooler than wipe away. Maybe I'll use that. Sounds a little more sophisticated. Yeah, tell me a little bit about your experience with this. Did you enjoy it? Was it horrid? What do you think?
Well, it just was, I couldn't control the pressure and the marks at all with the wipe away. It just so I came back and painted the sky again and started over, and it wasn't much better.
Perfect. Are they acrylics or oils?
No, that's oil.
Okay, good. Yeah, so if anybody's using purely acrylics, I don't know if I have any purely acrylic painters in the class or not. It doesn't work. I've had so many students try, I've tried, acrylics are just too fast. If you had to open acrylics, which I've never used, I believe that they would work better. Open acrylics stay wet a lot longer. So what do you mean when you said that you didn't have control? Is it just like your fingers in the paper towel were just too big?
Well, yeah, I mean, having not done that, I mean, I've taken a paper towel and wiped the whole painting out before,
There you go.
but trying to make shapes with it, I would leave, I'd stop for a second and it would leave a different kind of mark, or I'd go too fast and wipe out more than I meant to. Yeah, it was just like using a brush for the first time.
100%. Thank you for saying that, because that's true. I hope that it's not once and done for you, because it wasn't as pleasing as you had hoped. It is difficult and it is a trial and error, and I learn a little bit each time I've done it, and I've probably done well over 100 of them now. Well, actually probably even well over 200 of them by now.
Yeah.
All right, Karen, 300 of them. And yeah, so I'm definitely learning each time and experimenting each time. And even after class, I did a couple more just because I had the paints out, and I had so much fun doing that with you guys. And none of them worked out as well as my demo did, so I got lucky. I look forward to painting over them with when they're a little fully dry and everything. So a lot of times it is me just the most basic of basic shapes, really big and simple, just maybe that horizon band and the grasses, and I don't even worry about the sky. I would just brush it all out and brush out all the water. It's just almost like do you know the word notan? Notan is Japanese, I believe, for black and white, or light and dark. I don't speak Japanese, but what is it, Meryl?
I think it's a reference to light and dark, but I also thought there was some kind of like balance concept to it. Like actually going back to that image we looked at of the coast, of that bluff on the coast.
Right.
I was kind of thinking about, I did pictures. I did 3. I did not post them. They were all very educational, and I'll leave it at that. But I was looking at that one of the coast, and I did something kind of similar. And I was thinking about the notan concept. And I think part of it is like that you're trying to find roughly like a half and half balance between light and dark. And I thought, looking at that coastal picture, I thought to myself, wow, if I could if I had the chops for it, that would be a good example of like a notan style study, because when you looked at that picture, there was a lot of light, like about the same amount of light as there was dark.
Exactly. Yeah, kind of a yin and yang.
Yeah, yes, that's that's sort of it. But I'd have to look back at old notes or something. I could follow up with that, but I think it's kind of a balance concept too.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would be scared of that if that's true. Then it makes me like Notan less, because a balance of black and white is just like putting your horizon line in the middle or having exactly the same amount of warms as you have cools. Balance, like a 50-50 balance in painting, generally is boring. I'm not going to tell you not to try it, because, you know, I'm always proven wrong. And there are successful, you know, there's successes in everything. I mean, the yin and yang, of course, is, you know, probably the most popular tattoo in the world.
Well, and I maybe I should recant what I said, because I don't want to ruin the concept by not expressing it well. So yeah.
No problem. And I don't know, actually. Yeah, I always just use it to mean black and white. But again, I don't speak Japanese or anything. So for me with Notan, it's just black and white. And then all of a sudden, if I introduce a third value to it, like I like to do, then it becomes a grayscale or a value-based painting. And so for me, Notan is interesting, but I generally, unless I'm using like a permanent marker, which I will do sketches with, especially when I'm doing little thumbnails, sometimes I just have a permanent marker and white paper. And it's kind of nice because it really does force you to just, and you have to decide the things that are in the mid values, are they in the lights or are they in the darks, which is an interesting concept. You know, and it can go back and forth. And a lot of times I'll try it both ways. Like, does the grass look better as white as the sky or as dark as the upright trees? So anyways, yeah. So with the wipe away, you can be very, very simple. I guess was the long short of it, is that it can sometimes just be just your biggest big shapes and kind of brushing that in a quick, almost using it like you would sketch with a brush, just to kind of establish some things. Does that make sense, Renita?
Yeah.
Great. If you would like a tiny bit of feedback on just design wise, your horizon line, this line going right through the middle, I mean, is literally going right through the middle of your canvas, which you can see does kind of stagnate the image a little bit. I will grab mine, maybe if I can find it. There it is. And you know, not comparing them at all, but oh, I just have to do a stop share, I guess. So now you can see me. So just remembering the 50-50 line, mine's not really, you know, so low, but it's, you know, 1/3 basically.
Yeah.
And that does, even though it's a very kind of quiet, serene, very horizontal scene, just by lowering that a little bit makes the sky you know it's kind of about this weird the striations in the sky and everything else. And then that also allows me to bring in the radiating lines of the sky a little bit. So just kind of questions I'm asking myself oftentimes is, where is my horizon line? Is that a good spot for a horizon line? You know, 50, you know, having it in the middle can work. I own paintings by great artists, you know, friends of mine who I really respect, and they will put the horizon line right in the middle from time to time. But then they're using something, it's not about the horizon. It's not about, you know, usually even the land in the sky, it'll be about a different element, you know, say a tree in the foreground or a barn that's poking up, you know, higher or whatever else. So anyways, let's go back to share screen. Anyways, I very much appreciate you trying this, appreciate you very much sharing this. And you can definitely paint over this, or, you know, every painting is about the next painting. Okay. So don't worry, you know, every painting we are learning from, both the good, the bad, the, you know, whatever it is. So anyways, awesome. Anybody else really want to hear from me? Gonna maybe pick one more otherwise.
Okay, yeah,
Who is that? Sorry.
Yvonne.
Yvonne.
Second row, okay, you're in the right row, go, there you go. And the dark picture to the left was the source. Clearly, I did not get the values. I just had more fun painting a picture.
Good. That's fantastic. That is, you said the right thing. This is a jumping off spot. You know what's funny? When I saw your painting and I didn't know the reference, I was like, oh man, that is a cool reference. I wonder if she'll let me borrow it. Because I actually like it much more than the reference. You know, this is because of having so much dark, it kind of flattens out in a lot of ways. So I actually like what you did. And I urge you guys, you know, we do not need to follow our photos. Our photos are just inspiration. They're just a jumping off spot. We can put as much into it or as little as we want. Yeah, so what techniques did you use to paint this, Yvonne?
I started out using your last demo.
So kind of wiping away a little bit?
Yeah, but then I just kind of went back to painting.
Yeah, good. How did you like working over a slightly slippery surface that you kind of had the design on a little bit?
I liked it.
Good.
I like the feeling of it. I like the fact that the paint, the oil paint, seemed to dry quite quickly using this technique, and so it was easy to come back and dry brush over it.
Yeah, and I really
even-
want to compliment your dry brushing, like the little bits at the tops of the trees and stuff, how you just kind of let the brush do a lot of the work for you. That is really beautiful. Some
Thank
really
you.
interesting, nice things going on there. And it looks like you used a nice flat, kind of a straight brush, as well as kind of a more organic brush as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I started with a filbert, but this is a 5x7 canvas.
Oh,
And the number 4 filbert eventually got too cumbersome, so I switched to a 4 flat sable. And that got the blockier strokes.
yeah. So you can see how it's very soft, and I'm guessing you used a filbert mostly in the sky.
Mhm.
And then for your ground forms, to get sharper shapes, you used a flat, I presume. And you
Yes.
guys can see the difference there, how the sky feels sky-like and kind of soft and edgeless, just nice gradations, but there's definitely variation in light and temperature. And then you get down into the ground and things feel a little more solid and blocky and sharp edged. That's a great way. I'm trying to remind my students is let the clouds feel like clouds and the rocks feel like rocks. And what I mean by that is the edge quality. And that's something we'll talk about further on in the class, probably on about class 4. But anyways, I just wanted to point that out for everybody. Nicely done there. I also appreciate that you left the foreground kind of undescribed. Like we just kind of quickly skip past the grasses and everything here in the foreground, and we're into the middle ground, which is more interesting than your foreground, these grasses, more interesting. And then we get into here, which for me is my favorite part, and that's kind of the focal point. So I think you did a nice job of kind of leading the eye by using an increasing amount of detail and variety of brush strokes as well.
I did have a lot of trouble with the sky where the sun is.
Mm.
I started out with the Indian yellow wash on the panel. And when I tried to lift out color for the sun, the blast of sun by the tree, I wiped out all of the yellow. And so it just went down to white canvas, which is not what I wanted.
Okay, so here's what you get to do. Once it's dry, you're just gonna put a little bit of paint, Indian yellow back into it if you want, and just leave it very, very transparent, and it'll work.
Okay.
So yeah,
Thank you.
you can always go back into this and warm it back up. But it looks good in the photo, so I don't know if I'd worry about it too much, but I do
Okay.
understand what you mean. Great. Anybody else have any feedback or questions for Yvonne before we move on here?
I do. I just think it's really lovely. And I look at that and I see so many things that Michael has taught us, you know, like how it's kind of pointing and leading your eye. And then the colors that are just so beautiful and subtle, like you've got that little green sort of edge of the rock and then some orange in there, and the background mountains are grayed down, and I like the white blast of sun because it ties in with the little bit that's in the water. I don't know, I think it's really beautiful, really beautiful.
And then one other thing I'd like to point out too is looking at the negative shapes. There's great variety in these shapes. None of them are, you know, replicating any of the others. They're all different. So really nicely done there. And that's a tough one for me. I will end up just putting, you know, making tree and end up with, you know, what looks like fence posts back there. So nice job on that. So variety of forms, variety of shapes is going to be something that we will be focusing on today. So thank you for letting me use that as an example. But yeah, quite nice. Do you have any questions at all about it from yourself or for me?
Only how do you restrain yourself from just jumping into the painting process?
Oh, I don't. There's nothing wrong with jumping into the painting process. Like the wipe away method, if it's something that's interesting to you, you know, you don't have to use it at all. But if it's, I prefer it with a mixture of the wipe away plus paint added. I don't like it generally with only wipe away. It just looks too thin, too transparent, and too wishy-washy. So I don't restrain yourself. I think you should not restrain yourself. I think once you feel like you want to start painting into it, paint into it. I think it's going to be generally more interesting that way. Yeah, in fact, most of the time when I do a wipe away method, people don't know because it's completely covered. I've just used it to establish my design and my values very quickly. Yeah, I don't have it behind me anymore, but there was a plein air painting that I showed you guys last week that I did that was, you know, 5 minutes of wipe away method and then 1 hour of painting over the top of it. And so I just do that to establish things really quickly. So great. Let's go to albums here. So I want to very quickly just look at some tonalist work and talk a little bit about line quality and what kind of lines do what within a painting. I want to look for horizontal lines, which, you know, as we discussed, are the more restful lines. So let's see, where is a good example for horizontal? I guess we can just start with you, Mr. George Inness. So the horizontal lines, the lines that just go from left to right. Everybody understands that pretty well. Those are very restful. When you look at this painting, as for the most part, it's a very quiet, restful painting. And a lot of the paintings I will play up my horizontals just because I want my paintings personally to be kind of meditational and quiet and relaxing. I like the idea that my paintings are kind of an escape for people, like a quiet place to get to in their homes or their office or whatever else. I always love people telling me that they love looking at my paintings with, you know, sitting in the mornings with their cup of tea or cup of coffee, or in the evenings with their cup of wine as they're kind of, you know, unwinding from the day. That's one of the greatest compliments I get, is when people say that they actually, you know, sit and relax with my paintings. I'm sure they're not doing it daily, but I really like that. So there's a good example of horizontal. He does have a vertical in here, as well as a couple rounded forms. You can see the repetition of rounded forms. He's got the sun, the top of the tree here, and this bush. And then he actually, Yvonne, threw a figure in there, it looks like, in a white shirt, but I'm not positive. I can never quite tell always if George Inness has figures or what that is, but it looks like to me like the back of a person with their arms kind of out, like they're walking, I don't know. And then you can see a couple smokestacks way back in the haze. So you can picture a lot of coal burning and everything else and adding a lot to the atmosphere. Let's see if we can find one more good example of horizontals here. Yeah, it's funny, there a lot by George Inness here that is the horizontals really played up here, right through the almost through the middle, isn't it? He puts this band of kind of yellow ochre to play off the greens and the reds. But it really just calms this piece down, even though he's got these three trees and the rounded forms as well. And you're going to find that in almost all paintings, you're not fully reliant on just one of the line qualities. When I say line, I don't want you to think like literally like this dark line or this line here. What I mean when I say line is where two things meet. Okay, it could be two colors, two values, it could be any number of things. Like we could say that this is the line, the top of the reddish tree against the bluey grays of the sky. That could be a line. Anything can be a line, again, where two things meet. And so I want us to be looking for strong use of lines, like in these vertical trees, or implied line, which he's not using a whole lot of here. We'll find that in other paintings, or soft lines. And look at this. So we got this soft line of the tops of these trees against the sky in contrast to these sharp, strong vertical lines, which are much darker and crisper. And they do, you know, they both plays up the sense of perspective, as well as just draws our eye towards these strong contrasts. Our eye is almost always going to be drawn towards contrast, right? The most common use of contrast is in values, lights and darks, but it can also be in contrast of temperatures, in contrast of colors, anything like that. Like this figure definitely grabs our eye eventually, just because of that. He's basically the darkest thing in this painting, and he's surrounded by lights. So that's contrast. All right, let's look for vertical lines. I like this is a good use of vertical lines by Dwight William Tryon, Tryon. So vertical gives us a kind of a sense of rigidity. A lot of times when you have a lot of parallels like this, it takes on kind of a mechanical, almost like man-made thing. You'll see that, of course, in cityscapes and everything else. But in conjunction, I've got to stop using that word so much, but with the horizontal line of the tops of the trees and then the water, it's interesting that it's just almost everything's either side to side or up and down in this painting, but it's still very beautiful and somehow organic. And I'm thinking that comes through in the use of the angles in the grasses, where he's breaking up this mechanical side to side and up and down by adding the angles in the grasses and variety of forms there, the rounded shapes here on the tops of the trees. And then he also breaks it up with these leaves and kind of the foliage throughout. Something I really like about Tryon's work too is that he is combining impressionistic brushstrokes, kind of, you could almost say Monet in there, right? As with kind of a sense of tonalism. That's oftentimes where I kind of like to lean with some of my work. Maybe it's not as evident, but I like the idea of broken brush work, even though there's a lot of harmony. And he's doing this by keeping the values close. So even though it's going pink to yellowy white to blue to pink to green to, you know what I mean, back and forth. If we squint our eyes, they all blend really nicely and quickly together. And that's because even though the colors and the temperatures are different, the values are almost exactly the same all throughout here. The same thing in this foliage. If we look down at the bottom, you can see, but it's, you know, that goes from a reddish green to a more greenish green to a gray green. And again, if we squint our eyes, they just kind of quickly blend together. So nice job, Tryon. Perpendicular lines, just like we just saw there, are also great use here. It's horizontal, horizontal, vertical, vertical. This is Charles Warren Eaton, who's one of my favorite painters. I look at his work a lot. I love his use of the auburns and the yellow ochres and his grays. Something I definitely have tried borrowing quite a bit is his color palettes. But this is, so this, you have the horizontals, the arched shapes, and the, and the horizontals and the verticals. And that creates kind of a sense of stability when you combine horizontals and verticals, where they're able to be grounded and strong. Even though it's winter and they're very spindly, they feel grounded and in place. Does that make sense, you guys? Great.
Who was that that painted that?
That's Charles Warren Eaton, E-A-T-O.
Okay.
Trying to see if I can find any X shapes in here. That's a tougher one. Artists don't use X's as often, unless it's kind of a, I'm not seeing any in this. Let's see if we can go to modern tonalists. Yeah, X's are a tougher one. So if you can literally just, maybe if you've got a pen and paper, just draw an X there and just see how it's not a very inviting design or line element. It kind of, X marks where we're not supposed to go. Here you can kind of see a little bit of crisscrossing. There's an X in here. And it just looks busy and also kind of like you're just not going to get through that. So it can be useful. I guess I'll see X's in roads and stuff and railroad tracks and different things like that. He's almost got the beginning of an X where this trail comes across, and then he's got the hinting of a trail here. So this will be a great example of a found line where it's very obvious. He wants us to know that this is a path. But then he also has lost and found lines here where they kind of come and go. They start and disappear, and our eye will still follow those lines, even though he's got a very strong contrast between the darks in here and the light of the water. As we come down into the areas that are not in shadow, that contrast becomes much less because the grass is in light, but it's still there. So that line, there's a lot of variety in the line that's helping us to decipher. I love this painter's work. Alexei Alpatov, I believe is how you say his name. Alpatov, I'm not sure. Might want to look up some of his stuff. Just lovely. I think there's even I was gonna say there's even a cliff painting here that I just really love. He's using the wipe away technique in areas. He uses a lot of palette knife and spatulas, I believe, in his work. You can use little like rubber spatulas like you'd use to clean your showers. For painting, I have tried with that. I actually did do some water in a painting I did of was it Cambodia? Yeah, Cambodia, a boat painting. And so it's fun to experiment with other tools, credit cards, old credit cards and things like that you can use to make these different marks. But I really love seeing the variety of marks that he makes. We do
What
have
was his last name?
Alpatov, I believe, Alpatov.
Thank you.
I believe.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
If for those that want to know the name on my Facebook page, you've got it printed his name. Thank you for doing that. So if that helps people, yeah, where your cursor is.
Yeah, I try to put it up there. So anyways, I also love his use of, look at this soft line up here at the top of the cliffs where it's really getting back to atmosphere, the very, very soft and almost lost edge of these clouds and the softer edge back here. And then as things come forward, so Susan, if you did decide to paint your cliffs, maybe looking to this and saying, how does he deal with, he's got really strong, crisp, sharp edges up close. They get softer back there. I love the kind of reflected warm light that he allows to bounce around in certain areas. And then he uses these seagulls to even break up like a different angle. Because if he didn't have those seagulls here, this would be kind of a big, flat, boring area, but if you use the seagulls as directional lines, it kind of helps dissect the space and also kind of brings us back in to these shapes. So he's got horizontal and he's got angled lines. So angled lines, do you guys remember what the angled lines will do for us oftentimes?
Energy.
Energy, yeah, exactly. Active and motion. And doesn't this, even though she's kind of upright cliffs, doesn't there feel like there's a sense of energy in here because of these angled lines kind of zinging us into that? And if you can get a zigzag pattern, so you notice in my paintings with the creeks and the trails, I will often use kind of a more curved meandering, which is, you know, a little more calm. But here we've got zigzag where it's sharper, crisper, bang, 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 bang. Zigzag definitely is an active line. Does that make sense? If you imagine a skier coming down a mountain, and when they're just cutting, you know, they're literally kind of jumping up out, you know, up off the snow and flinging their body around. And then, you know, you see their trail behind them and it's just a very sharp Z formation as it goes down. That you can tell that that's a much more active form of skiing. It takes a lot more muscle and energy than just the nice, slow, swooping S curve as they're kind of making their way down the mountain. So these are all great for us because as we are deciding on our image that we want to paint, we're also going to be deciding how do we want it to feel? What do we want to convey? And if we want our paintings to be, I always like to say, a little more fiesta, a little less siesta, then you can add zigzag, a little more action, even an S curve compared to just horizontals, even a vertical compared to a horizontal, to me, feels like a little more motion, just because the act of standing up to me is more active than lying down. You know, and that might be different, interpreted different for different people. Let's see if we can find diagonals. All right, there we go. Harrison, let's look at Harrison's painting here. And I feel like the photo is, I don't think, maybe it's going down towards the beach because, yeah, okay, so he does have a straight horizon line on the hills back here. And then there's this slow, great, you know, diagonals, very slow. But and at first I thought maybe the photo was crooked, but then I can actually see there's water down here. So it's just slow hill down to water. And then by giving us that bare glimpse of the very soft blue-gray back there, that allows us to know that, yep, he meant for it to be at a slight diagonal. Diagonals add just a little bit of motion, but what's more obvious, of course, is going to be in his trees. So instead of just having nice, you know, upright trees, by having this diagonal lines, it gives a sense of action and movement, even though they're, you know, trees and probably not moving much. Do you guys feel that? Like, as opposed to
Yes.
everything being horizontal and vertical, just that little bit of action line in there. I try to remember that a lot. I kind of like the idea of trees having a kind of a life, kind of a movement. I love the idea of trees as dancers, as movement. And, you know, even though it's not in our time frame, right? Trees get their shapes over years and years and years. But if we think of it as, you know, being sculpted by the wind or by the different elements or by the ground they're growing on, they are growing because of something, and they're living with whatever's going on, whether it's, you know, constant wind or living on the bank on a sloped hillside or whatever else. So I really like this painting. This painting is one that I have kind of come back to a number of times, and it is simply because of, I think, the little bit of motion. It's just, it could be so boring and so straightforward, but just there's just enough variety and yeah, diagonal lines, and they're not all the same. Like you can see this line's a little more upright, this line is very upright, So if I were to draw over the top, one line here, look, very vertical. This tree comes up at an angle and then goes very vertical. Then the next line, a little more of an angle, a little more of an angle, and then a little more of an angle, and then a little more of an angle, right? So now it's quite sharp. Same thing here. So it's almost like a fan in a way, like a fan that's been halfway opened. And that again adds just kind of a sense of movement and action. All right, just a couple more. One of the design elements I'm going to be working with today is called the radiating line. Let's see if we can find any. There might not be any in these references. Here we go. All right, so radiating lines give also motion because it's an angle, but it also helps tell us, like in this, the cast shadow radiating out kind of tells us where the light source is. This isn't a great example of a radiating line. Do you guys mind if I look up? No, I don't want to do that. Might not find it. Anyways, we'll talk about radiating line, but a radiating line is like the full fan, right? If you just imagine like the fans that you can open and close, and you imagine like the spines of them. The radiating line, if you put like a dot in the middle, or if you just imagine how kids draw a sun with the sun and then light rays coming off all the way around it. That is a radiating line. It's a great tool. Oh, here we go. Look at that radiating line. You see his figure, and she is the subject, right? And look at these radiating lines. Look at it. That's amazing, right? He doesn't overplay it, but basically everything's like, just try not to look at this pretty lady on this path, right? He's got the contrast between the greens and the oranges. That's definitely going to draw our attention. Some of the darkest darks are in her hair, right next to some of the lightest lights. But a big part of it is this use of radiating lines. Look at all these branches fanning around her, basically saying, look here, look here, look here, look here, look here. Isn't that interesting?
Your X composition is there too.
I'm sorry. It is, you're right. There is a strong X. And he even played it up by letting this branch literally line up with the edge of her shawl, I guess that would be, and come down, and look at that, lines up with this. And then look at this branch, lines up with the shawl. I mean, I would totally be terrified to do that. This is Dan Schultz. I really like his work as well. You can see I do a lot of the same kind of stuff he does with the reds behind the trees and different things. So, you know, of course, we're always attracted to artists that paint, so, you know, use some of the same techniques and tools that we use. But I think he's really good. In Dan Schultz's work, it's an interesting thing. You rarely see dark darks. He starts it off, it's almost like a mid value to a light value. And somehow he's very successful in that. He doesn't have real dark darks, which is already kind of a handicap. He's kind of taken away one of his heavy, you know, one of his big tools, but he gets away with it. And he works in these kind of compressed value ranges. If I turn this to black and white, it would be pretty quiet painting. Yeah.
Would that be considered mid key or more high key?
Well, let's just go ahead and save. No, here I already have it saved. Let's go to Photoshop and let's open up Dan Schultz. Where are you, Dan? Give me 1/2 second. I've just got to find it. And don't worry, it's almost break time. You guys have been awesome. A lot of talking today. There we go. Let's fit him on the screen. All right. So the question was is that high key or mid key? My instinct is to think that it's primarily high key just because there's so much things in light. I would say the shadows are in mid key. The darks are in the mid key. I'm going to go ahead and let's just see what happens. So I just grabbed some dark. So if I were painting, I liked having dark sometimes. But if I was here with Dan and I came in and I put, like, let's say I want her focus on her hair. So, and that's what I want my darkest dark. Look at how much value he's left on the floor by not using darks, right? But it destroys the entire image, doesn't it? Just having that black, you almost can't look away from that black spot I just put there because it's just too strong a contrast. And then let's go and do it. Image dust desaturate. Whoo, look at that. He did not use much of a value pattern, did he? Very little when he's establishing it. He's painting more like Monet paints, like a colorist, where he's using his colors to tell the story, not his values. So that's an important lesson. This doesn't really work as a black and white. And a lot of Monet's paintings completely fall apart in black and white because he's letting the contrast of his colors and the contrast of his temperatures in the paintings, the warms and the cools, do the heavy lifting for him. Whereas I primarily like to let my values do the heavy lifting. Okay. So when we get into color next January, we'll be discussing this in more detail. But isn't that interesting? Like, you would never think that this painting is lacking for interest or anything else, but it is not being done by the values. It is being done by the colors and the temperatures. Pretty cool. The other one that I wanted to talk about and point out, of course, is my favorite one, and that's the S curve. I use it all the time, probably too much, but it's very comfortable for me. Just kind of that nice meandering S. I love it. I love it as a lead in. I love it as a way just to kind of invite the viewer. If it's a road, if it's a trail, if it's just, some trampled grass versus tall grass, of course, creeks, rivers, all the other things. I think the S curve is one that we can all understand. There's something innate in it that just seems inviting to us. Let's look at this really quick. This is Bato. I really, really like his work. He's more of a colorist for sure. But what line quality do you see in this here? Very subtle use of lines, right?
Radiating.
Schultz. What's that?
Radiating.
There are radiating lines. Good. Yeah, I was sure that you guys were going to say horizontal and vertical, but there is a sense of radiating line, isn't there? Radiating line. Only kind of on the right side, not so much on the
Diagonals too, the sand.
Yeah.
diagonals and then up to the horizontals. So it's using everything, so but it's the diagonals are very not diagonal. They're almost horizontal. So the painting still feels very relaxing, very calming, very almost meditative. And then he kind of saves a couple lines of stronger diagonals just for the transparency in her dress and her hair, which gives us a sense of what? A sense of movement and wind, right? All of a sudden we know that there's just a little bit, it's not a strong wind, her hair's not going sideways, it's just barely being lifted. And the dog always kind of cracks me up. Funny. Great. All right. So is anybody wanting to paint along today, or you guys just kind of want to watch and I'll talk about painting and then you guys are going to paint after class? I will be doing black and white. I can do stop share here. All right. And I went ahead and prepped my panels with a mid-value gray, which I do a lot when I paint with black and white acrylics. And, that's just something that I like doing. It allows me to get from my darks to my lights a lot quicker. And then everything's kind of nice and covered. So you'll see that when we pop up. I'm going to do a quick little 10" by 10". I'll see, I might actually do, like, again, we'll see how much time we have. almost 2 hours. We'll see if I can't do 2 or 3 of these. And I'll show you how I use black and white acrylic paint. The other cool thing about the black and white acrylic paints is next week we're going to be talking about color and introducing color. And I will be able to show you transparent glazing by doing these paintings. They'll be completely dry. So glazing with oils, not with acrylics. I'll be glazing with oils over acrylic paintings next week as one small element of beginning to talk about colors. So that's another reason I like doing these black and white. So let's go ahead and take a, what do you guys need a longer break, or is 5 minutes okay? 10 minutes? Let's take a 10-minute break. That'll be good. I need some coffee. So 10-minute break, and let's get back here at 10, just after 10:20. Okay. So getting up to the easel here. I won't be able to use my upright as much. So I have a plate here that I put black acrylic paint, and I mixed a little bit of burnt umber into it. So it's a little bit warmer. So it'll have kind of a reddish tint to it. And then just the white over here, and I'll be mixing up my grays on there. I've grabbed a wide variety of brushes, big, small, all the way down to little tiny guys. So I can make a bunch of different marks. I'm going to start with my big shapes. And the reference, I guess I can go ahead and maybe post that up here, is going to be really quite basic. I'll post this to our Facebook page and send it out in the email. This is the first one I want to do. I didn't print a black and white, unfortunately, of this, but I think I can make it up enough. And it's basically just a soft dome of a line, one horizontal, and a couple angled lines that will kind of lead me in. I may kind of introduce the idea maybe that somebody's kind of walked through the grass a little bit and create a bit of a lead in, a little bit of an S curve, or maybe even a zigzag for action. And then I could introduce a little, maybe a bit of a cloud, maybe some kind of an angle, probably this kind of an angle to bring us back. And that'll almost bring, so the line will go here, here, and then there. That's probably what I'll do. So have a trail. Sorry about my shaking there. An angle of a line leading up, this line, and then probably have a cloud kind of coming off there. So we get a sense of movement, but I want to make all those things pretty subtle so that this dark area is kind of the focus. Does that make sense? Let me grab a little tape so I can put that up.
Sorry, but you are recording?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. You guys can see that all right? And this is just a little 10 by 10 that I've got up there right now. All right, and again, I went ahead and made a mid-value gray. It kind of matches roughly the palettes if I was using my palettes. So this is going to be kind of a calm, relaxing image here. And you'll see too that this is a square format, which is a little more difficult to design oftentimes. And then what I did was my reference is also a square format. So just be aware of that you want your reference to match your format of your surface that you're going to be painting on. So if I was painting on a tall horizontal, I would probably have a tall horizontal reference. If I was painting a vertical, it'd be a vertical reference. The next image I do intend to do is going to be a vertical, kind of a portrait style. And that one's going to be all about radiating lines, a lot more action in this, right? Kind of zooms you into the focus, everything kind of lining up. So that's why I wanted to deal with the radiating lines as well. Whereas this one does not really have that. So I often will start with my darkest darks. I'm going to go pretty basic. One of the great things about the acrylics is I can chop back in so quickly. So I'm just using a great big brush here. It's just not a whole lot of control. I know that it's going to have kind of this arch to it. My tallest things are kind of up about there. And look at that. Already I've got something kind of interesting, don't I? Just a little bit of movement. It's kind of got kind of an abstract nature to it. Just a little bit of an angle, a little bit of a bend. And I'm combining my brush strokes. Some of them are really nice and light so that I'm barely touching the canvas. So it leaves kind of broken edges because of these really bad bristles. And then I'm going to look down into my corners and kind of pick out some of the darks. And I could even, just as a note, I think I'll have my trail and hopefully that'll be pretty subtle. So a little bit of motion in there compared to my reference, just because I kind of want to get us into there. And definitely, I like this photo reference enough. It's got Queen Anne's lace and different things going on. The grasses also kind of follow along the hillside here. They also kind of have that soft radiating line or soft kind of domed line, as well as the shadows down below. So there we go. That's almost a no tan. It's not white because I've already grayed the canvas, but it has kind of a just a dark and a light. I haven't changed values at all right now. I'm just kind of establishing my darks and my lights, and I'll come and break those up here as well. All right, so that's a pretty quick block in there. I'm going to go ahead and add some white to those darks so that I can begin to get my next values. So all I'm doing is just mixing some of the white over, trying to figure out my next value. And already this brush may be getting too big. I love that I can just keep layering and layering and layering with acrylic so quickly, especially if I'm using a light touch. So there's a hill back there that's a little more hidden behind everything further back. I'm going to go ahead and pop over to my lights and get my sky in there. What a difference, right? That's why I love the gray background, because once I add in the white or the lights, it's very obvious very quickly. So I have been using acrylics to start my paintings to kind of test my strong values really quickly, more and more often, and then I will let them dry for over a day. Oil, we all know that acrylics dry, within 15 minutes, a half hour. But we also, when we're going to paint over them with oil paints, we want to give them time to actually do something different than just dry. We want to let them cure and actually set up. And it does seem like when you go with oils over the tops of acrylics to avoid cracking and delaminating, meaning that the paint will kind of fall off, we do want to use a touch of medium, like a Galkid or Liquid or something like that, just up to 5% mixed in with the oil paint that you're going to add on top is enough. And let's see if I bring in a little bit of a hint of a cloud to kind of remember I want this kind of shape. And I've got these two shapes here that are mimicking each other. They're too similar. So I'm just going to get rid of one of them. And then I also punched too big of holes in my tree here, so I'm going to darken a couple of them. When I want to mix and create like in between values, it's pretty easy. If it's still a little bit wet, just picking up a little bit of the paint. Now I'm just looking to try to make kind of interesting shapes, within these trees, making it so that there's some kind of a movement without making it too much. So with the acrylics, I can basically go carving in and out, getting my negative shapes. Very quickly. And now just continuing like this little dot I put into the tree is too bright. So just knock it back. I'm also going to let these trees that are far back on the hillside, I'm going to lighten those a little bit. That's this band of trees here, so that they hopefully recede back into space just a touch. A little too light, add a little more dark to that. A little more dark to that. So just because I mix up a color and get it on my brush does not mean I have to use it. If I put a brush stroke on there and it's not doing what I want it to do, stop and remix. There we go. Do you see how those trees just quickly fell back just by lightening those values a little bit? And now I'm already to the fun part. I'm going to start introducing a lot more texture and movement in here. I'll let my brushes do a lot of the work. It's just kind of scrubby grasses. When you're using acrylics, if you use a lot of water, it's going to be hard to control. So I will use very, very little water. In fact, what I'm using for my water is just a little mister. And I'll just add a tiny bit to the tray, just to keep my paints moving and active, but not, I do not want to be painting with soup or worse yet, watercolors. So, and now I can just begin to experiment with different values and just see if they're reading, doing what I want. You guys see how quickly I was able to get into this with just black and white and a couple simple big shapes? Now I'm also trying to kind of remember my idea of kind of something hinted at here. It'll be a lost and found line, hopefully. But just something that people feel like, well, I could follow. Somebody already walked through these grasses. I can just follow in their footsteps a little bit. And yes, this is another kind of destroyed brush that's creating nice and just kind of organic shapes. And I'm just spinning it around, moving it, letting it kind of do its thing. I can keep building these textures up all day long. I can get them nice and thick, or I can have as much texture or as little as I want. These are pretty tall, dry, dead grasses, so I can really play that up if I want. Now just added a little more white and just let it get a little lighter here. And I'll see if this brush is actually doing kind of what I'm hoping it'll do. Might not. I might just have to pull up another tool. Maybe a palette knife so I can get nice crisp edges, or just a different brush with less hairs or finer hairs or whatever it is. But I can just kind of experiment, and I'm not afraid because it can just keep building it up. With acrylics, you really can't go too wrong because you can just keep adding paint on top. Grasses will be getting a little bigger as they're coming closer. Just kind of letting my brush kind of bounce and play. And all right, looks like texture is beginning. It's starting to feel a little bit like a tall grass with the idea of some weeds and Queen Anne's lace and everything else kind of growing in there. I don't want to be just grass, grass, grass. I'm letting it stay nice and organic, I hope. Going back and forth between kind of my darker ones and my lighter ones, just letting them kind of build up on each other. If I kind of lose something that I want, I can just get it right back. I also want to put a little bit of light on the tops of these dark shapes, these trees. Like a little bit of light is kind of reflecting down from the sky a little bit. So just kind of lighten the tops a little bit of the edge of some bushes here. So I started with basically just a dark and a light, then I added a third value, a lighter light. And now each one of these big areas of value, I can just break it up, breaking up those values more and more. I could totally be done. And actually this would be, you know, plenty if I knew I wanted to come in and do a lot of oil painting over the top. Probably be overkill already, but I'm going to let this one be more about glazing into it next week as an example for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of keep building up a little more texture, and we'll move on to zigzag. I mean, not zigzag, radiating lines. Is that reading okay for you guys? I guess you can't really see the cloud that I put in there very well, but you can almost see just a little hint of a line there. Little hint of a line here.
There's almost an X.
Almost, yeah, you're right. Hopefully it still feels inviting.
And it almost looks like a woman back there at the right by the trees where maybe she's walking on the path towards the trees. A little bit of light color that you have to the right there.
That would be kind of cool. Yeah, I could do any of that stuff, right? I could, you know, it might be interesting to put like two figures back here, kind of where it's opening as if they're walking off on a hike. And with the acrylics, you know, with oils, I go from dark to light much more succinctly. With the acrylics, I'm not afraid to bring back, you know, darks again, and you can just layer so nicely. You can really just turbocharge your painting progress. It used to be that I could hardly teach glazing in my classes and workshops because the oil painting needs to be completely dry before you can glaze in and put thin transparent washes of color over the top. But with the acrylics, I just don't have that same problem. And you can see I've kind of lost my line here, so maybe I'll just kind of bring that back a little bit. Nothing solid, just kind of like as if maybe the grasses have been moved just a little bit more. Kind of trying to create some kind of softer tops of them, of the trees where they're kind of meeting up with the sky a little bit. And I'm already feeling pretty good about this. What I'm going to do next is pull up a little tiny brush and get a couple small marks in there. Let's go ahead and grab a little liner brush or two. Just watercolor brushes here. And just a couple more grasses that are really helping to tell the story a little bit thinner. Need a little water because they want to go on pretty thick still. Making sure my grasses aren't all aiming the same direction. Couple Queen Anne's lace kind of up against the darks. One thing when you are doing acrylic paintings and if you're planning on glazing in with oils, is that you want to have everything a little bit lighter. Because every time you add color, no matter what, your painting is going to get a touch darker. So if I start too dark with my acrylic painting, I can definitely get myself in trouble. But since it becomes an oil painting, I can just, you know, go from dark to light at that point. That's my Queen Anne's lace I'm kind of putting in there now. And just want to keep them hopefully pretty organic. So this kind of big area right here, this want to break that up so it's not so solid. Anyways, I could just keep working and working, you know, as much or as little. Just like the wipe away method, we can use this as a very rough outline of what we are thinking we want to do with our painting. Or we can come in and add more detail. I hesitate to add too much detail when I do know I'm going to paint over the top, because what happens is you can fall in love and start to protect it. And I don't really want to fall in love with anything at the very beginning of my painting. Just kind of hinting at a little couple sky holes maybe. And I wish I could glaze into it immediately and show you guys how fun that is, but we'll have to, this will be my way of making sure you come back next week. I'm gonna put one more coat of white over the sky. And oftentimes I'll make my sky pretty much white and I'll use my oils to come in and tell the story of the clouds and whatever else is going in there. Because when I come in with my transparent paints next week, I know that with the white background, in fact, I'm going to get rid of that cloud and I'll just try to remember that I probably want a little bit of action. And I'll do that with my oils. All right. One thing I did is I straightened this line out, and I actually want it to be also just another hill coming down. So I'm going to come back in and get to those darks a little bit. And I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. Another thing about acrylics to be aware of is they do darken when they dry a little bit more than oils do. So be aware of that, that you'll come back the next day and you'll be like, wait a minute, what happened? My beautiful, glowy, bright light painting, it got dark. So they do get a little bit darker. just like the wipe away method, this takes a little bit of trial and error, and we're learning as we go. This is another tool that I want to give you guys that again is going to work for some of you. I've had some students that have really gone a long ways with doing the acrylic underpaintings. Others that see it as kind of a waste of time. Like, if I'm just going to paint over it with oils anyways, why am I bothering with that? And I understand completely, but it's a fun, another tool. What do you think? Are you guys reading that pretty well? I will take your silence as a deafening yes. All right, there we go. Just putting everything into the water there so my brushes don't dry out. And see if I can zoom in any more, or maybe just straighten it out here for you. So there you go. That makes sense. Great quick way to kind of get in, get kind of basic. You can see I can add a lot more with my oils, a lot more texture, everything else, but I've got my big elements laid in. I've got some good ideas of what I want, what I like, everything else. And you guys okay for another 5-minute break while I clean these brushes and reset up again? All right, demo number 2 here. And this is a much bigger panel. So 16 inches tall, 12 inches wide. So a lot more to cover with the acrylics. You can see over here that we've got this nice angled road going back, as well as the angle of the edge of the water. And then we also have radiating clouds. So this one's going to be very much more action-packed than the last one. The last one just had soft, domed lines. So we will, and this one, the lines are going to be much more important. So I will steal my daughter's ruler and get some lines on there, just so I know where I'm at. So 1, 2, 3. So kind of my favorite spot is the right about there. Make sure that's nice and flat, our horizon line here. I can check it by just giving it a quick measure. All right. And I'm also going to create kind of a vanishing point, which would be right about there. And those are already wrong, so I'm just going to wet those down. These lines are too important. Ta-da, brand new. Never happened. You saw nothing. So this angle is pointing right into the corner, so I have to decide if I want that. Normally that's a big no-no because it's pointing you out, but because this is so action-oriented, I can maybe leave that there. So it's roughly right about there, there, going to my vanishing point right about there. So let's see how those lines work out. Just dip my finger in some water. Yeah, it's interesting teaching over Zoom because normally I would talk for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, give a quick demo, and then you guys are painting and I'm walking around trying to help you guys. But with painting over Zoom, it's just so much more me talking constantly and painting a lot more. It's kind of an interesting thing. I'm just kind of knocking in the darks just to see if it's actually going to work, the kind of design elements that I've put into it. And again, because they're acrylics, I'm not too worried. I can paint over all of this. I can go back and forth between my darks and my lights so much easier. Excuse me. These are more in the grasses and stuff, so these lines are a little more organic, a little more wild, but they're still radiating in the same direction. This will be really interesting. It's almost like a plowed field at this point. I've got a friend named Brenda Boylan who does a lot of agricultural paintings, and they're just beautiful. And she uses radiating lines a lot to kind of lead the viewer in. It's very nice. Another local Oregon artist, a good friend of mine, is Amanda Houston. She's a pastelist, actually. So is Brenda, primarily. Amanda Houston does radiating clouds a lot, and it's a great effect. They're very dynamic and beautiful. So Brenda Boylan, Boylan, and Amanda Houston. Two artists you might want to look up if you're interested in learning more about the use of using radiating lines as your design template. Amanda Houston calls it an armature, which I hadn't heard before. I got to assist her in one of her workshops, which was a lot of fun, even though I'm not a pastelist. But it's fun to sit in and listen and learn just different ways people teach and describe elements. And so she calls this stage just kind of developing the armature. If you think like sculpting, where you're putting the wire in before you add the clay, just kind of giving yourself the underlying base structure. All right. On our horizon line, we do have some trees and different things going on here. Very small, way back there. And this is the Tualatin Bird Refuge, which is a really big wetlands. In fact, the trail around, the primary trail around it is 3 miles long. And it's a great place to go paint. It's only about 15 minutes from my studio. I feel really lucky. And when I get out there and with the herons and tons of ducks and bald eagles and nutrias, and there should be some beavers, but I've never seen them. I like to throw my horizontal lines in when I have angles a lot of times. Just again, just like I did with the wetlands and the fields last week, just to kind of give myself, just so I know that things are lying flat, even though there's these really strong, pronounced angles. Same thing is going to happen in the sky, like I just did. Of course, it's going to be more organic, and I'm going to put it in lighter. They're also not going to the same vanishing point. That would be kind of strange in a way if everything was aiming right at the same spot. Their vanishing point's more over here. And I may go ahead and just wet down the top of this just a touch. It's got a big drip because I aimed it in one spot too fast, so I want to make sure I catch that. There you go. Got to move it around quickly. Getting any of the drips before they go crazy. And my clouds are kind of doing that same thing. It's the nice thing about that mister. I used to just use a simple spray bottle, but it, you know, the droplets are so big that I would get a lot of runs, a lot of dripping going on. These are just lines for my future self here. I'm just kind of giving myself some ideas of where things are moving. I'm gonna keep them wet for a little bit because you'll see why here in just a second. Nice and organic. I don't need it to be exactly like the photo by any means. It's just I'm using it as a jumping off point, an idea. All right, so now I'm going to take a sort of dry brush, and I've kept spraying that down there. So now I can just soften these up. Make them more cloud-like, right? We want our ground to feel like ground, our rocks to feel like rocks, our trees to feel like trees, and our clouds, most importantly, to feel aloft, soft, like they're floating. This crazy brush has just exploded out. You see how the clouds feel so different than the hard, firm ground, hopefully. I also do have a tree shape I want to probably go ahead and kind of knock in there. Kind of gives us a place to get to in our painting. Also kind of breaks up the monotony of that really strict horizon line. I'm also going to bring him down below the horizon line. I want to make sure he's coming forward compared to everybody back there. Great. I think that's actually a decent start. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to step back and observe. And because this is the most important stage of this painting, the design, and just making sure that things are reading, that it feels like this is actually a road I could drive or walk down, and get back to this tree a little bit. All right, so I'm going to step back here just in case I need to change anything. So it's important every couple minutes, especially in the design stage when everything's really kind of critical, to step back, observe, make sure things are playing okay. So by using that mister, I can actually kind of do a little bit of subtractive. I've kept the paints somewhat mobile, somewhat active. But even if I hadn't, it doesn't matter because they're acrylics, I can just layer them. Good. All right. What do you guys think so far? Is this working out for you? And can you guys see the sky at all, or is that too light?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, what I'm gonna do then is start mixing up my values a little bit and come in and break those up. Again, I could fully leave this as is with the full knowledge that I'm gonna come back in and I'm going to do oil paints on top. I can do as much or as little detail as I want. Like if I was just pretending this was an underdrawing for an oil painting, that's probably plenty if things are in the right place, if I feel like they're working. But I can go ahead and just keep building it up, getting more detail, more small shapes and big shapes, and more in betweens in my values. Make it look like the grasses are kind of going up and in front of the water that's going to be there. Also add a little bit of reflection. I can just kind of look deeper into my reference and decide, you know, okay, there's some grasses over here that are kind of breaking up the edge of where the road is, and all of this, again, I can bring in with oils. So it's just like when you do a drawing underneath your painting, you know, how much information do you need? When do you get yourself in trouble? Do you get yourself in trouble when you add too much information? Like you make your drawing too specific and too good, so that now all of a sudden you're almost treating it like a coloring book where you're just coloring in the lines, or you're trying to protect your beautiful drawing. I can definitely get myself in trouble when I use this technique and go too far and all of a sudden start to fall in love with it. I have to be willing to sacrifice all of this in the names of making a better end painting.
Michael,
Yes.
breaking up that horizon line on the right 3/4 of the painting in the water. Where the reflection is, it makes it look like the shoreline is irregular, and it really helped the painting, I think.
Oh, good. Yeah, and that's what I'm going to try to do over here too, is bring in like some grasses that are also a little bit irregular. And good, thank you. That's good feedback. Yeah, and just that knowledge that we can go from dark to light and back again. The idea of implied detail as well, just kind of letting the mess that is, you know, this bad brush and these kind of quick dashy lines kind of do part of the work for me. With, again, the knowledge that when I come back in with my oils, everything can be refined that needs refinement. One thing I also like about acrylics is I can use my pinky to steady my hand. With where with oils, I would be just putting pinky marks all over my painting. Make that a little darker. For those of you who are like me and love coffee and want to paint details still, but your hands are getting shaky or whatever, there's a lot of different techniques you can use. By simply taking one of your longer brushes and putting it against the edge of your panel, you can rest your hand on top of it. Making kind of a short, they're called maul sticks. I used to have an actual cane in here that I stole from my mother-in-law, that I would just hang the crook of it over this bar or put it on the side, and then I could bring it out and put a place for my hand to rest. So there, those last couple of drops that I just touched, there's too much because I've been spraying the paints to keep them wet in the tray. There's puddles now, and those brush strokes were really wet, and they were completely acting differently than previous brush strokes. So I just went ahead and, with my pinky, picked up the excess water. Yeah, and I just love that I can just back and forth. Like those dots I just put in were all too light, but I don't mind them a little bit. They're just, I don't want dots. So now I just go and paint over the top and break them into smaller pieces. I'm just painting right along the edge. I already feel like I may be, especially down below here, kind of overdoing it. But I want to show you guys that you can really get in there and get detail with these acrylics very quickly. And does that make sense to the students that have never been with me in class before? What my idea is about doing an acrylic underpainting with the idea of going over it with oils. Does that make sense at all to you? And have you guys
Yes,
seen or
it
heard?
does make sense. It makes sense.
Okay, great. So I'm establishing my design, establishing my values, establishing my structure. This one's definitely a little bit on the more complicated side compared to the one I just did. This one's I don't want to say less forgiving, but it is a little bit less forgiving because I'm dealing with perspective. Anytime I'm using anything mechanical, and you don't really think of, a dirt road as mechanical, but it is perspective. It's still dealing with math, and it will look right or it will look wrong. Whereas my little hill with a bunch of just crazy tall grasses and some weeds growing in there and some random trees, I could get away with a lot more. So for those of you who aren't quite as comfortable, you do not have to do anything this sophisticated if you don't want to. Feel free to, again, always err on the side of simplicity. I would rather you're learning the lesson of design and structure and strong values and then making something overtly complicated just for that, because it's hard to concentrate on the lesson when you're struggling too much. I would rather you focus on one or two elements at a time. So please don't feel like, week 2 when Mike's already doing perspective roads and, all this detail work. No, don't worry about that. Just make the painting. It could be as simple as you want it to be. There's a lot of references in that area, the media section on our Facebook page for you to choose from. Please err on the side of simplicity. You'll have plenty of time to make paintings that will be more challenging design or drawing wise as you progress and get more comfortable. And you see how I'm working from simple, big shapes, big lines, and slowly each section just kind of gets broken up a little more and a little more, and their values break into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's the way I like to work. I used to, because I came from the world of illustration and cartooning, I used to really worry about the drawing, the outlines of things. And now it's much more about their shapes and their structure, and just knowing that, again, the detail will come. I feel like I've already said that 10 times between this class and last class. The detail will come. Don't worry about it. If you want it. And a lot of paintings are more successful with less detail. Which is a good reminder that maybe I should kind of stop going so crazy on every little grass here. Just a couple more, just a couple more. All right, let's get back to our sky, shall we? Drop that brush in the paints and these should, all right, my sky is nice and dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next level of light in there. So I'm looking to which clouds are more pronounced. This guy here, this little buddy over here. I'm not really, now I'm trying to, even though I'm using a big flat now, I'm letting it dance and move and spin so that I'm not just making a consistent mark. I'm letting the calligraphy that is innate in the brush do part of the work for me, or maybe most of the work for me. And I want to get down here along the horizon line, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to do that all at once because I've got detail and I'm going to be dealing with it a little differently. So I'm just going to keep bringing this upper portion of the sky. So with the misters, the only way that I found without using open acrylics that I can have a slowed down work time, because now I just put those in, now they feel a little crisper and a little more designed, which I don't quite want yet. So I'm going to keep them wet so that I can do what I did just before. Man, even with that, they still dried pretty quick. So let's see. Different brushes are going to make different marks, so be aware of your tools. I'm not saying this brush that's exploded at crazy edges is the right brush or anything, but I just want it to feel very cloud-like. And this brush is impossible to control, which is kind of nice. It kind of just lends itself towards the very abstract nature of clouds, the very organic. It's kind of nice slowly building those lights up over. I put my, I had that kind of mid-value gray, and then I went a little lighter than that. And now I'm just going a little, well, quite a bit lighter, and getting to the almost whites. Man, this section dried. And it makes me kind of panic a little bit, like, oh no, it dried. I'm not ready. I didn't blur it enough. But at the same time, it's fine because again, I can cover all of this with oils. I just got to remind myself, this is not the painting. This is the design. I've only been working on this, believe it or not, for a half hour. And, I'm off to a good start. If I was doing this with just oils, it would be a lot slower probably with as complicated of a design and everything else as it is. And the nice thing about like clouds like this is they're so just abstract. I can't hardly mess them up as long as I'm kind of letting their innate structure and line read through. Like nobody's going to see the reference and say, you know what, that cloud was actually just a touch wider and did this and did that. As long as I'm letting their cloudness and their directionality that I'm chasing, this radiating line, read through, then I should be fairly successful. Just scrubbing and softening. Palette's already starting to dry out a little bit, so just give it a little bit of water. My lightest area in the sky is kind of going to be kind of where the nexus of the clouds kind of meets up. So play that up a little bit. Go a little bit darker, but still really light, and get to my horizon line and separate those trees out. Where it's wet, I have an area where the clouds are actually meeting the horizon, so I'm going to get rid of that a little bit. Those darks on the horizon line are already pretty well set, so I'm kind of good that I can get in there and they'll still stay. I can wipe back the whites, but the blacks will stay, which again, you just couldn't do with oils. They would be too wet. Anywhere I touched is going to come away. It's going to separate out. And that white back there is just soft enough. I can, there we go, push those trees back a little bit by just lightening their value. Let's bring in a little bit of the light reflected into the water. It's not pure white like up above, a little bit darker, but just about to where I'm going to step back again and just kind of observe both my reference and my painting here and just kind of see where are my values close, where are they way off, what changes need to be done. You guys see anything obvious here that you're just like, man, lucky I'm on mute. Mike does not want to hear me swearing at him like this. Anything you're seeing that's really obvious that's you kind of wish I would deal with? Remember, it takes a village to make a Michael Orwick painting.
Okay, I have a question. This is Yvonne.
Hey, Yvonne, what you got?
You've got the brilliant white patch in the sky, low in the sky.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
You've got the brilliant white patch low in the sky,
Right.
where the brightest part of the cloud is. And you've got the tree on the left. Would it balance the painting or imbalance it to put a little bit of light on a small part of the path?
Like it's kind of busting through and actually illuminating the path?
Yeah, because the path is exactly the same value all the way through its whole
Yeah,
length.
that could be really useful. It depends on how my sun is poking out. If I, show a little bit of the sun, then yeah, I could probably allow a little highlight. It would be, kind of directly down on it, so maybe, yeah, a little bit it's peeking through. That's a good question and an interesting design idea. I will have to think on that, but yeah, you definitely could. I can see that being really enthralling and beautiful. And, definitely helping another tool to help lead the viewer's eye through it while not having everything radiating, but, having some kind of a beam or whatever else catching certain elements of it.
Well, and that comment kind of, I'm looking at the photo reference and maybe on that path part, as it gets closer to the vanishing point, it's a little bit brighter than it is in the foreground.
Right, yeah, and I'll play that up with color when I get into oils. So my yellows and reds will come forward, my blues and grays will fall back. So if I have the path feeling a little warm, like if the dirt or the rocks or whatever here is a little more yellowy, a little more red, and it gets a little bluer and grayer as it recedes into space, I can definitely use that as a tool as well to convey. Also the edges, I can make the edges a little crisper here and getting a little softer as they get back. So I've got a number of tools that I can use to create the illusion of space. Just broke my brush. It cleaned too violently.
Oh,
That's what I get. These are like those 24 brushes in a bag for, $5. They're little kids brushes. But I love, again, I love my good brushes and I really love my bad brushes. And I'll just throw some glue on there after class. All right, just drop that in there. That one's not being used anymore. Yeah, it's funny. I bought so many, of these really cheap just bags of brushes when my daughter and her little friends back when they were little kids. I used to teach art classes to the kids and do fun things. And so I'd buy all these brushes and now I find myself using them a lot, constantly going over to my daughter's desk is right behind me, her art area. And I'm constantly dipping into her art supplies and stealing different tools and including this acrylic paint that I'm using today and everything else. Because I never used acrylic. Well, I didn't use acrylics since right after I got out of college. I used acrylics for a while when I was doing illustration, but then I really just didn't for years and years and years. And then when my daughter started painting, I started joining her and we would do abstract paintings together. And she never actually fell in love with oils. She likes watercolors and gouache and acrylics. So by having her supplies around, I began experimenting with them, and I'm definitely lucky. I have a whole there's 2 studios up here, 2 art studios, and no shortage of art supplies between the 2 of us. Phew. All
And
right.
what do you do with all the canvases?
They're everywhere. They are everywhere. Here, I'll give you a tour. I'm gonna take this off here because I feel like I'm kind of just about done with that for today. I'll probably, oops, sorry, kind of soften up some things and do a little bit of detail work after class here. But I kind of feel like that's a pretty good spot to let it be done. And we will see. Give me 1/2 second. There we go. All right. So this is my studio. Here's where I stand when I'm hanging out with you guys. The little computer area, which is just to the right. This is the neck that the camera that I'm holding is normally on, and that's why it's so bouncy. And I've got this nice big hues easel here, my workbench, which I cut plexiglass to mix my paint on top of. So I have a great big mixing area. All my, well, some of my brushes. And then underneath, all the different colors. So here's white paint, reds, browns, yellows, blues, and blacks. Underneath that, it's just like towels and old t-shirts. Down there is cleaning supplies. In here is where I keep all my paper towels, the rest of my paint, and all the kind of random paint supplies. Sink. Paintings. Over here is a bathroom shower area, which is just filled with big painting panels. That's where like the 6-foot ones and the 4-foot ones are. Here we have, let me know if I'm moving too fast and making you guys motion sick. This is my daughter's painting area over here. Bunch of her supplies and stuff. Paintings all over the floor. Over there is the windowsill, stacked up with paintings as are stacked about 5 or 6 deep. Over here, paintings against the, I've got little shelves that I can put the paintings I'm kind of in progress with. Those are the ones from last week's class. And another work area. So that is a kitchen island that I converted into another art area. I made the top of it much bigger. And let me see if I can, give me 1/2 second here. And over here, I'm on a cord, so I can't go too far, is a second painting studio. This is what we actually consider the old painting studio, because my mother-in-law lived with us for 10 years. And so the new studio is my mother-in-law's bedroom, which is where I'm at now. And then way back there is all the frames and stuff. It's a whole nother room. And then through there's a door, and the whole back area is filled with, well, storage. So there's a bunch of frames and canvases. But yeah, look how deep this is with just canvases. All big ones, these are all 36 by 48s, 48 by 40, no, 36 by 36s, and those are all 30 by 40s, and it looks like they're probably about 10 or 20 deep. And then over there on the couch, way back there, there's a whole bunch of paintings that are kind of to be considered maybe nearly ready to go. That kind of explain it. Was that the most blurry, shaky tour you've ever had? And there's you guys. All right, hold on. Close your eyes so you don't get seasick. I'm going to switch over to the other. All right, great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That concludes, well, we're 10 minutes short, but I think I'm about done with that painting, and definitely need a drink of water. Yeah, so
Our assignment.
yes, exactly. Your assignment is black and white again. Whether it is acrylic or oil is up to you. If you want to go out and get some acrylics, if you saw what I did and thought that was useful information and something that you might want to experiment with, then fantastic. If you would rather just keep working with oils, completely fine. What we are looking for is design lines, right? You can decide. We talked about a number of different design lines that you can use to build up the armature and the structure of your painting. If you would even like to revisit, some of the images that you did last week, that's fine. So we're just looking for, I experimented with soft swooping lines and radial lines. We talked about zigzag and soft curves. We talked about the X. We talked about horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. So those are all lines. Next week, what we're going to be talking about is the value planes within landscapes. The 4 values in landscapes that will help us describe it. And we'll be looking at examples again of master's paintings and looking at how do they use 2 value and 3 value and 4 value paintings. We are often overcomplicating, especially when we're dealing with tonalist paintings, by adding too many values. So thinking 2 to 3, possibly 4 values, and what kind of design lines are you using? And also, are they strong lines or are they implied lines? Again, if we think back to the painting I just did, I've got strong lines in my ground and then more implied lines in my cloud. Strong lines on the ground, more implied lines in the clouds. Does that make sense, you guys? Have fun, experiment, play. Let me know if you have any questions during the week. I will try to check in on our Facebook page. And also feel free to ask other students. If you finish your assignments earlier, if you want to put them up each time you finish one, it's kind of nice because that gives us all more opportunity to get back to you. You can even post midway through your paintings and say, I'm having a little bit of a struggle. What could I do here? Or what do you think? Am I going in the right direction? We don't have to wait to the end of our painting to ask for help or a critique. Oftentimes that's too late because we're mentally done. We are not going back to that painting anymore. I know that to be true for myself and most of my students. So yeah. Any questions, you guys?
I have one. Yeah. Hey, Michael, Susie here.
Yep.
When you're doing plein air, I know you said it takes 2 days to dry in the acrylics before you apply oil. Are you going out like when you went to Manuka and you're doing them in black and white, or are you just going straight to oil?
Typically straight to oils.
Okay.
But I do plein air in acrylics from time to time, but I just do that. I don't.
Oh, I see.
Or just the designs. I'm only working on design and composition at that point. I'll bring them back into the studio and color them later.
Okay.
So yeah, I went out to Sabi Island a month ago, and with some friends, and that's all I did was take out my black and white acrylics, and I did, I think, 3 little 9x12 acrylic paintings. And it's kind of sad when everybody else is making these big, beautiful, very colorful paintings, but I knew what I was after. I knew what my goal was to just look for design and values, and I had to be comfortable doing that. So it depends on what you're going out to do plein air painting with. The other thing is I have definitely painted oils over acrylics within about an hour, especially outdoors when it's warm and dry. I just can't guarantee you that your masterpiece is gonna be passed down to your great-great-grandchildren. We don't know what the durability is. We know that they're much more durable when we let them dry for at least 24 hours, more durable after that if we let them dry for 48 hours. And then they're much more durable if we use a little bit of medium with them. For some reason, that helps with them not cracking.
Oh, thank you. And where is that Tualatin Bird Refuge? Is it 99W that you can go to? Okay.
100%, yeah. So I go off what's called Roy Rogers Road.
Oh, know where it is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a back entrance to it. It's not very well marked, but there's a parking area and everything else. They're doing a whole lot of construction over there right now. They're widening the roads. Yeah, it's across from the pumpkin patch if you're on Roy Rogers Road. Otherwise, yeah, there's a great big huge entrance off of the 99 with visitor center and everything else. It's just different views than I paint typically.
So
Super.
what medium works? This is Renita.
Yep.
What medium works? Like, was walnut oil okay, or what?
I believe that any of the mediums help, any oil, whatever. And I think it's just because the oil acrylics, I really don't know. And all the reading that I did through, I think it was Grumbacher, they weren't even sure why there was some, and it's micro fractures. So it's not like big obvious cracks like you see in old paintings and stuff. They're micro cracks, but that still does mean that there's something happening. So yeah, for me, I use Galkid gel is my favorite medium, but there's Liquin is a very, very popular one. I believe oil would also be pretty great. But you just want a little bit, just a little bit. Like again, 5% is enough, 10% is plenty.
Would that be the same case then for gesso, since gesso is water-based?
That's what they're not understanding exactly, but the gesso has a tooth to it and is absorbent more than acrylics are. Acrylics have kind of a plastic feel to them a little bit. So they're wondering if it's that. It's all new research. It came out in the last couple of months. Because yeah, I was just glazing into it with just a little bit of paint thinner, get a bit of Gamsol, and that does seem to work as well. So what I've been doing now is just a tiny bit of Gamsol and a tiny bit of Galkid gel mixed together. So it's quite liquid. That's when I want to create my transparent glaze. But what I have found too is since I've started using a little bit of medium, my glaze is much more colorful. It doesn't gray down as much. It's not absorbing into the paint as much. It's sitting on top. If you imagine the medium being like a glue that you're mixing into the pigment a little bit, it makes sense. Plus, it keeps a tiny bit of a shine and a freshness to the oil paints. So I'm actually liking it more now that I've learned that. I just didn't typically do that. So it's not a big punishment because it actually looks nicer. Good question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? No? All right. Well, it was really a pleasure. Thank you guys for sharing your paintings today. I really appreciate you playing along and kind of going and trying things that are maybe a little out of your comfort zone and experimenting and pushing yourselves just a little bit. You don't have to push yourselves like crazy. I don't expect complicated, difficult paintings. Just push yourself 13%. I don't know where I heard that, but that's a quote I always use. That's my number. 13% out of your comfort zone.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, Diane, it was good to see you. Meryl, good to see you. Renita, Yvonne, Michelle, Susan, Karen, and Linda. Great to have you all. And anybody else that joined us earlier and had to tune off or get off, I will get these posted to YouTube and share the links and everything else. And are you guys, any of you guys interested in the reference for the first painting that I did? The little tall grasses and stuff. Okay. I will share that in the email that I send out and maybe on Facebook as well. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being a part of this and spending 3 hours with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Thank
week.
you.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Great group.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys are awesome. Anybody wanting to stay on or should I go ahead and undo?